Welcome to the Wednesday, May 24th PFF forecast. We have a special podcast because the people have asked for it. They want to bet the WNBA. And so we are officially bringing the WNBA into the fold. Maybe not officially a WNBA podcast, but maybe. It's going to be a great show. We're going to talk to Ben Brown. He's the man behind the WNBA model and the bets that we are going to be placing for the rest of the summer. Let's ride. Ben, it's good to have you back. For people that don't know, you've literally been in a room secluded from your family for months, preparing for the WNBA season. So it's good. It's good that you made it out. It's great to see you again.
Yeah. I missed my family for a few months there post NFL season, but it was all in the name of getting the model correctly for the WNBA for the printing press. Basically, I mean, we all make sacrifices in our life. Some have more sacrifices than others, but that was my cross to bear. And I'm pleased with the early performances. I would say of the betting model. I know Brad, was pleased with at least some initial winners. I do think, sussing out where these teams rank, obviously through the first couple of games is very much going to help, for the entire season. But yeah, it's been a pretty exciting ride, I would say, so far already.
Yeah, I should say, it was a cool offseason for the WNBA. I think there was some super team building. We talked Brianna Stewart pre-show, now a New York Liberty member and off to a phenomenal start. We've seen kind of a concentration of power. I know the Aces, they added Candace Parker to an already loaded roster as well. Chicago Sky legend Candace Parker. But yes, as you mentioned, you gave out the Chicago Sky and the LA Sparks. The Sky were plus 4.5 and the Sparks were minus 2.5. And I think both teams won by 20 points. So the model is off to a hot start. It was worth neglecting your family in the free agency window for some early season winners.
Did you manage, Ben, at all before we dive deep into the WNBA to place any NFL bets during the offseason? Any futures that you've placed? We haven't talked in a little while, of course, because of your WNBA research, but anything that caught your eye that you placed a few shekels on?
I mean, I will say first off that I really enjoyed the last episode, obviously with our guy Judah. I think you guys came to some consensus of spots that I really liked from the most passing yards, rushing yards, and receiving yards area. So I had to, of course, join the Rashid Shaheed bandwagon for the New Orleans Saints. I was surprised that neither you or Brad mentioned Derek Carr potentially as to lead the league in the most passing yards. Obviously, from PFF's perspective, really easy schedule. Depends on, just how much they actually do want to press on that angle. But I think early on, specifically, we could see some Derek Carr shootout type games happening in the NFC South. So I know he's, I would say, aggressively priced at 8-1 or 9-1, but that was the spot that I thought the printing press would maybe lean towards. And I know you guys identified some other quarterback specifically, but that was one spot that I thought maybe deserved a second look for some people as well, I would say.
I know you do have your eye on. We talked about the offensive rookie of the year and stuff like that a couple of weeks ago, but I know you do have your eye on one of those plays that I think is a good look.
Yeah, definitely. So this has, the rookie of the year, I would say offensively has kind of in a lot of ways gravitated towards wide receiver in the last couple of seasons. Obviously, we've had some really top upper echelon guys go in the top 10, and that obviously didn't happen this year. But I think maybe the quarterback specifically might be just a little bit overpriced. And I do think there is, very much that second tier of wide receivers that can contribute. And I think one guy that I think has a pretty clear path to opportunity right away is Zay Flowers. He's at 18-1 on DraftKings to be the offensive rookie of the year. It just seems like this sets up really well, right? Baltimore is a team that is very much going to be in the playoff race all season. A lot of times this does seem to go towards a team or go for a team that maybe doesn't get all the way there in their first year, or else they would have a guy in Lamar Jackson be the MVP of the year of the league in 2023 or have the coach of the year and all these other things fall into place. But it seems like if Baltimore is kind of in this 10-7 type window, maybe even a 9-8 type window, which I think their schedule kind of sets up for, if Zay Flowers is that, the early season, I would say workhorse from a usage standpoint at the wide receiver position, I think that could actually happen relatively quickly. Rashad Bateman's going to be hurt, kind of like you mentioned off air, Brad, and I don't know. I think with Odell Beckham Jr. kind of in the fold, like how much of how much pass routes and opportunity do you actually, I would say, put towards Odell Beckham Jr. With the year off, everything else, like think he might have a little bit of time getting up to speed in the Baltimore Ravens offense. So I think Zay Flowers kind of being the one constant there this offseason, working through training camp and everything else, could kind of emerge as that guy early on. And if the Ravens are in kind of that contention, I think he makes a lot of sense. And I do think he could, easily get over that 1,000-yard threshold. And if he does, it would take a runaway performance from Bijan Robinson or one of these quarterbacks, I would say, to potentially wrestle it from him. So I like that one at 18-1. I do gravitate towards the wide receivers. That might be a little bit of a blind spot given this current class, but I think there's enough talent there that, one of these guys, either Zay Flowers or maybe Jordan Addison, deserves a bet in the market from my perspective.
Especially if Lamar has he's had no receivers on his team, right? It's been a narrative that people are looking to focus on. So if there's a receiver that breaks out, that's going to be talked about a lot. It'll probably come with Lamar playing well, which people will talk about a lot because of the contract situation and all that stuff. So you could get some momentum behind it quickly, and the quarterbacks are in some tricky situations, right? So it's not as if those guys are just kind of walking into a situation where they're going to throw 25 touchdowns. And then, the only other player there is the outstanding favorite, which is Bijan Robinson, right? But I mean, the running back position is a crapshoot. And here's the thing, as good as Bijan Robinson is, as good as that offensive line is, that team is probably still losing a lot of games. Right. The tough thing is, are they going to commit to the run when they're down 20? Are they going to put Bijan? Is Robinson going to be racking up? If they give him 350 carries and they go, they win 4 games, I don't know that that's going to be great for the franchise. So you could have that playing to your advantage as well. You mentioned the printing press. If you are not yet a member of the Discord, the printing press Discord, you should get involved. It's probably the best way to hang out with us in the community during the off season and during the season, because we can talk about bets there in real time. Brad's always dropping nuggets he's hearing from around the league. Ben is in there, Judah's in there, Arjun is in there. A lot of great folks that are in there as well who are great bettors. So it's an awesome place, whether you're new to betting or you're a veteran, to come hang out with us. The link to the Discord you can find in the description on our YouTube if you're listening there, or if not, you can go navigate to it and find it, or you can hit us up on Twitter, and we will send that out. I think we'll do a better job of tweeting that out as well when we drop the podcast. So go join that, and if you're looking for a little PFF Plus subscription, 25% off with promo code Forecast, FORECAST. You can get a year-long subscription, which means it'll take you all the way through this NFL season and fantasy season and draft as well. So get yourself set up for your fantasy league for the upcoming betting season, all the great tools that are there and content on pff.com. So let's jump into the WNBA. I got to admit, I've not been a fast follower of the WNBA, follow the NBA pretty closely. So can you give us a sense, like, for people that are out there that are probably aware of how the NBA works, 82 games, most nights, it's 12-minute quarters, there are 3-pointers and 2-pointers, like they know the game of basketball. What are the differences in the WNBA? Just to kind of set the stage. And like, I'm sure you've thought about this because you've modeled it. But like, what are some of those key differences about, the way the game is played, structure of the league, all that stuff?
So yeah, 36 regular season games, basically, 12 teams. I think there's, some discussion of potentially expanding that a little bit, but you do get, I would say, a lot more. matchup based handicaps in those in a way, because you do have a decent at least sampling based on the 36 game schedule of them playing a number of different teams. So I think that is kind of interesting. And kind of like Brad mentioned, like there was in some ways like a fundamental shift this offseason in particular to more of this like super team type approach that we have seen, I would say, build up in years past with the NBA. And in a lot of ways, I think it's kind of following the same blueprint that the NBA had, where these teams like New York Liberty bringing about a number of different stars are maybe in some ways having an initial struggle. And I say that with Liberty basically losing their opening game and then beating the doors off of the worst team in the WNBA in their second game. So I think maybe it's a little bit of a overstatement right now, but I think seeing these teams kind of come together is going to be kind of an interesting, betting angle through the first few weeks of the season, because the big difference for me in the WNBA versus the NBA is like the NBA is so much more one-on-one, I would say, type basketball, very much star driven. And I do think in the WNBA specifically, like you can get away with having a more team-based concept and more more methodical possessions, set plays, those sorts of things than I think we even see in the NBA. So I think it's a little bit more almost like college basketball in a certain ways. And we also probably see, I would say, like the dominant post play still very much kind of take hold at the WNBA level that I think is, if you don't have a big post that can potentially, facilitate like a Jokic or somebody like that, like they're somewhat deemed irrelevant. But I think the success of some of the teams that we're seeing, especially early are kind of, the dominant post play, the Connecticut Suns of the world, basically with like Alyssa Thomas, who is like a, like a power forward type player, which is, in some ways, not really a position that is really focused on at the NBA level anymore. It's much more of like the stretch four, three type guy that's kind of taken over. And I think that's probably like the big fundamental shift. But yeah, you see it obviously, in a number of different ways as well. But that's, kind of where it's at. And it is intriguing because I do think, the Aces last year, win the championship, in a lot of ways do get better. And in a lot of ways, I know, George might be expecting this with, the LeBron James and the Lakers, but like the Seattle Storm were kind of like the second place team, very much, I would say, dismantled. Super retires, a la, LeBron James potentially after this season. Brianna Stewart goes to the New York Liberty, kind of like moving on in a lot of ways. So I think, setting up in the same storyline for what the Lakers are going to do with LeBron James retiring, Anthony Davis, maybe moving east or something like that could potentially happen. But I think it'll be interesting to see how they play out, this expectation. George looks very frustrated with my forecast.
Coming home.
He's
coming to Chicago. He's coming home. He's a Chicago guy. Dude, yeah, why not? Why not?
LeBron, I thought for a second you were saying LeBron. I was like, yeah, LeBron would be the type of guy that would pretend to be from Chicago all of a sudden.
Right.
Yeah, no thanks.
Yeah,
no thanks. I'll take AD though.
Although, to be clear, I'd almost be happier with that. Instead, what I think we're going to get is LeBron's going to come back, and the whole reason that he's doing this retirement song and dance is so they leverage their future even more. We're going to trade everything for Kyrie. And, it's not going to work, but we're going to be terrible for 10 years after. So,
yeah, probably.
Just in case you're wondering. So who there are a few teams at the top. You look at the standings, by the way, WNBA stats.WNBA.com. There's a lot of interesting data points there. Do you power rank these teams? And if so, who are the best teams? Is that generally the way that the market feels about them? I guess my initial thought would be people aren't following this super closely. They probably know a couple of big names. They probably know about Brittany Griner. Maybe they know about Brianna Stewart. They probably, knew about Sue Bird, probably know about Diana Taurasi. And that's about it. You've already mentioned, I think, did you mention, was it Alyssa Thomas? But, a player I'd never heard of, right? So are you seeing your power rankings match up with the way that the market actually values these teams?
Yeah, so I would say I kind of have two different power ratings metrics, very similar to kind of, some approaches that we've used previously at the NFL level. But I have one ELO rating, which you can, I would say, adjust year to year using some other metrics that are available. So those are very much, I would say, adjusted to preseason win totals and the championship odds for every single team. And those ELO ratings have, I would say, a very clear top two teams. And I think that is very much how, the market had priced these teams preseason, and very much is kind of how they're pricing them on a per game basis. But it's very clearly, I would say, the Aces are, the class of the WNBA in a lot of ways, and did win the championship last year and only did get better. And I think from there, the New York Liberty are kind of the next tier below them, adding Breanna Stewart. They have, I would say, have a lot of questions as far as like how quickly can this whole thing come together. Sabrina Ionescu is maybe the best guard, in the WNBA. How does she kind of fit in with Breanna Stewart? Like those same questions that Kyrie and LeBron probably had to answer at certain points in time, are very much a question, I would say, for the New York Liberty. So those are definitely the top two teams. And I think the team that, I would say has probably impressed me the most, that it seems like the market was probably sleeping on, was the team that the Aces beat in the finals last year. And that's, again, the Connecticut Sun, who are 3-0, who kind of, don't really have the, I don't want to like, slight anybody or anything, but like the legitimate maybe superstar type player that can, go and get a bucket at the crunch time, crucial point in time that they absolutely need to. They don't really have that. They play a lot of, team basketball. They do pound it underneath to Alyssa Thomas. They do have a couple people who, can definitely stretch the floor shooting the ball as well, but they actually play just like really sound defense. And I think you see that kind of reflected in their totals. I think like going back to like the typical total you get in the WNBA is probably like 160 to 161 and a half to 162 would probably be like the mean expectation. You're going to find Connecticut Sun games, pretty typically in like the 156 and a half to 157 point range, then kind of based on their matchup, move out from there. But it'll be interesting for me to see if they can kind of, I would say, close that gap. In either metric. They were a spot that I've liked through the first, 3 weeks of the season. I think part of that is them going back to it, the market, maybe wasn't pricing them as heavily, or being as close to the Liberty and the Aces as they actually probably are right now. So I think they're the third best team. And then from there, the Washington Mystics in a lot of ways are somewhat similar to the Connecticut Sun, but they don't have quite as much from a supporting cast, and then have, what a lot of people would consider one of the best forwards in the game in Elena Delle Donne. So I think those are probably like the clear four best teams. And then you definitely have some bottom dwellers. You have some teams that are going to get ran out of the building. You have, the Indiana Fever, who are going to be 14 and a half to 15 and a half point underdogs against basically any team in the association, and especially in the top four. But like the differences, I would say, like these teams kind of play hard. And one betting angle that I've found is, when the Fever are kind of down, 20 at halftime or whatever, like you can actually kind of expect them to come back a little bit and at least make the game somewhat close. So I do think, understanding the hierarchy of the WNBA, but also kind of seeing like, what teams near the bottom are going to compete night in and night out, even after getting their butts kicked. And I do think the Fever kind of makes sense there. The Dream are another one that I think, are definitely better than the Fever and could very much be trending in the right direction after this year. Do have some young players, kind of in the fold that I think are exciting, but they're another team that, I think could very much emerge from that low tier and actually be, somewhat relevant, I would say, in the playoff race when it's all said and done. So those are, kind of the overarching, evaluations. And then you have like, teams like the Storm and the Lynx and the Wings, who don't really have a lot, kind of sit in this mid-tier, or worse type of thing. Don't really have I would say a ton of star type potential on their roster. So I think those three teams are kind of not necessarily interchangeable. And I do think a lot of the betting value is, in some ways betting for or against some of those teams. But, night in and night out, it is kind of tough to project what you're going to get from those three teams right now. And then going back to it, the final team I think that I haven't touched on, the Phoenix Mercury, kind of like you said, Brittany Griner's back in the fold. I think if you buy into narratives like, at some point, they're going to be a team that the WNBA wants to focus on and wants to get into the playoffs. Haven't really necessarily played all that well right now, but kind of with Brittany Griner in the fold, with Diana Taurasi in the fold, like they're going to be a team that draws a lot of interest. So I think they're a team that is probably going to be, a betting market opportunity further on down, especially if they do continue to play kind of poorly, because at some point it seems like, they're going to have to put it together to get Brittany Griner, get, Diane Taurasi in some ways in the spotlight that they probably deserve towards the end of their career, I would say.
So of all
LeBron
those,
James.
yeah. I was just gonna say, of all those, obviously that was a great breakdown of everybody, but who are maybe a team that you are kind of fading a little bit, that you think, the market is a little bit high on, and at least early season before we get more data, you're kind of finding edges and picking spots to bet against them?
Yeah, so the two teams that jump out right now, the Dallas Wings, Minnesota Lynx. I do think the Lynx are really bad. They did absolutely. I want to say they were up. It was like 17 or 15 at halftime yesterday against the Dream, and then lost still. So they're just honestly, they're a bad team. Like, I know Nafisha Collier is pretty good post player, but she's kind of really all they have. And I do think even, as them being, I would say, I guess like seventh or eighth in the power rankings, like they're very much a team I think is going to be right next to the Indiana Fever as kind of like the basement dwellers. So I do think there is going to be a decent amount of value on leading the Lynx specifically. And then another one I think is the Dallas Wings. They have, I would say, kind of like their star players is Eric Ngakwe, who's kind of this, I would say, almost like frenetic or kind of chaotic player in a lot of ways. Like, she can go down and drill like 4 threes from like 30 plus feet range, but she's also going to throw up like a ton of air balls like later on down the line. So she's very much, I'm trying to think of like an NBA equivalent. And the only person I can think of, I think George would get upset about me saying, so I'm not even going to go down that path, but very much like night in or night out. Like,
Russell?
I mean, that's actually the one I should have thought of basically, but it's I would say in a lot of ways similar. She's more probably ball dominant than what D'Angelo Russell is at this point in his career, but like, she's like somebody who literally can just like go 4 straight possessions, launching threes, have a turnover driving to the lane, and like none of the teammates will basically touch the basketball or whatever. So it's chaotic. It's at its best, it's fun to watch. At its worst, you're thankful that you're betting the other side basically. And it is, I think, a spot where you can almost in some ways see how the start of the game is going and buy into some live betting action. I think that's, in a lot of ways, the approach that I've taken early on, to start the season is more trying to figure out what we have kind of for the first 6 minutes, first quarter, and then from there kind of picking some in-game spots off.
Sounds like Dion Waiters. You can jump in, George, but I'm getting some Dion Waiters energy from her.
Waiters. Yeah, I was joking that D'Angelo Russell is a poor man's Dion Waiters, which is not saying many nice things about D'Angelo Russell.
To anyone, really.
Yeah, right. So take us through a little bit of the kind of your model. Is it basically just those power ratings? Are you taking anything else into consideration? Are you regressing to the market here? Like, how much respect do you have for the market, I guess? And you just kind of touched on it a little bit with like, you're playing a lot of live. But what does your like pregame betting look like? And maybe you can get into some of the games maybe upcoming.
Sure. Yeah. So basically, going back to it, I have the ELO ratings. I also do have like a market implied Massey calculation as well. The problem is, of course, like right now, like we've only had, 2 or 3 spreads, and as opposed to kind of doing that at the NFL level where we have 18 weeks of data or whatever, like a lot of that is based on prior expectation, especially last season. So I'm not really, I would say, including that a whole lot outside of looking at that right now. But then, some of it is, just like the rest factors, home away considerations. One thing that, I've tried to improve on this year is, the expectation at the team level for what each player is going to bring from a win share perspective. And I think, obviously with players in and out of the lineup, has not necessarily been a complete blind spot from my model's perspective, but has been something that I probably haven't handled that well. So including some win share aspects and actually being able to, remove those if a player is out or whatever, it is an improvement this year. And I think has, in a lot of ways moved the needle, in the right direction. But yeah, it takes some, the rest considerations, the power ratings, the win shares, the pace basically with which the team has played and kind of folded that all together. So I'm using less of a weight on, the market implied ratings, but I think that kind of like transforms into I would say like the basis for the model as we get to kind of like the halfway point of the season and stuff like that. But it's a spot that, just doesn't even, I would say in a lot of ways past the smell test right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because I guess to your point, like a lot of what happened last season, you said there's a lot of movement between teams. So it'd be very hard to kind of take some of those historical or just even last season's performance and really get a keen sense of what's going to happen early in the season. So you have some knowledge around the players, you have these power ratings, and then you're watching the games to kind of figure out, okay, what is actually, what is the opportunity here?
Yeah, and the model does take into account, rest components, and I do get like a spread expectation from the model, and then I can definitely price that against, the current offering or whatever. But in a lot of ways, it's just like original betting, especially early on in the season. So if you do see, some lower totals than what the mean expectation is, like the 156 and a half to the 157, like the model is very much probably going to play the over in that scenario. And then like tomorrow's, coming up, like the WNBA, this is, I think, going to be the Aces' second game of the season. I think it's sitting at like 172 and a half, 172 point total against the Sparks, who, probably are the second worst team in the WNBA based on betting market expectation. So like them actually getting to 172 games is very much going to require, the Aces to put up, close to 100 points again or whatever. So some of those things early on in the season, like even if I have like a bet that my model says is, a positive expected value bet, I'm still kind of in some ways waiting to approach that from an in-game perspective. So I very much have like a side that I probably want to target from in-game perspective, but kind of based on how the actual start of the game is playing out. That's, determining whether I'm, basically locking that bet in or not, I would say.
Okay. Yeah. So speaking of tomorrow's WNBA action, no player props, sadly, offered for.
They'll be there. They'll be there tomorrow. They'll be there tomorrow.
They will. Okay. Okay. Do you bet a lot of props for WNBA?
So that's So like my model, before this year basically was very team centric, and I was kind of going back to it with like the win shares and everything else. And just working on some things behind the scenes with PFF. I haven't done any real, I would say, modeling on it basically, and I kind of want to have that basis before really betting it. But I have some ideas percolating as far as like the minute usage and stuff like that, and actually being able to kind of predict out the stats that I think would offer some value against it. But I don't know. I know, like I'm kind of just betting the 6-pack, right, and kind of always have with the WNBA. I have heard that people tend to get limited betting the player prop action. It's not something I'm necessarily dove into heavily, maybe because of that, but I definitely think there are a ton of opportunities in that particular market as well, and things just don't move with the speed in which we see at the NFL, or I would say any of the 4 major sports. Either like one point, not to go on a huge long tangent, but like there are very much times in the WNBA where a player like Elena Delle Donne, who is kind of like like an Anthony Davis type person or something, where she'll go out from the game and there will be no adjustment to the live number until halftime or even later in a lot of scenarios, and sometimes the books aren't even adjusting for it. So in a lot of ways, you can even just pick up an angle like that every once in a while if you are actually tuned into the game and do hear that she is questionable or not coming back, basically, because that's just not a spot that the books are actively monitoring, I would say, in this particular market.
Yeah, that makes sense. By the way, current championship odds: the Aces plus 120, New York Liberty plus 140, Mystics 10-1, the Connecticut Sun 21-1, Phoenix Mercury 35-1, and the Atlanta Dream 37-1. Anything stick out there to you?
I mean, so going back to it, I know it's very narrative driven. I don't have this team even, I would say this high, but I think the Mercury do put it together. They have, obviously the veteran side of things. They have Griner, who could very much, still be one of the best post players in the game. Diane Taurasi very much could be one of the best guards in the game. So they do kind of have the pieces, I would say, to at least get into that discussion. So I like the Mercury a little bit at 35-1. Still feels like the Dream are probably a year or two away. They were kind of my preseason, I would say, darling in a lot of ways, but hasn't necessarily really played out well, I would say, through the first two games. So I think if I was choosing right now, going outside the top two, I think I'd probably take a little sprinkle on Mercury and play the narrative game here right now.
She had an efficient 18 in the first game, so if she's going to get even better than that, BG and Diana Taurasi's my goat. I don't know if she's your goat, but she's my goat. So I believe.
Yeah, I'm a huge Diana Taurasi fan. She's awesome. I like that. Okay, so I've got one bet in. That's good. Now I have a team. Okay, we've got an official team of the PFF.
We're gonna get you a jersey here pretty soon. It sounds like George,
yeah.
So
it's the Phoenix Mercury. I previously it was the Aces. When the Aces came on board, that was my introduction to WNBA. Eric and I were heavy on the Aces. So Phoenix Mercury. Brad, you getting on board with the Mercury?
We're Mercury Podcast officially, yeah.
Yep, there it is. We've got some games tomorrow. Your Minnesota Lynx, Ben, are in Phoenix to face our Mercury.
Our Mercury. Right.
Exactly. Our Mercury are 2.5-point favorites, total 159.5. The other game happening at the same time is Aces in Los Angeles to face the Sparks. As you mentioned, the Sparks stink. The Aces are 14.5-point favorites, minus 1,600 on the money line. Total, as you mentioned, 172.5. Anything from a pregame perspective that sticks out to you there?
Yeah, I mean, I do like the Mercury in this spot. The only question I would say is, are you gonna like the full game number as much as the first half? I think the first half will probably open at like -1, -1.5. I think that will probably be the smash spot. So that's definitely, I would say, my favorite bet. I don't mind Mercury -2.5 as well. I could see that one probably moving out to 3 tomorrow at this time. So we'll see what actually happens with that line movement. I do kind of like the over in that game a little bit, but I know the Lynx are so bad, but they're not very good defensively either. So I do think if the Mercury, the angle would in some ways be the Mercury blowing them out and getting over that number. So maybe that's, a secondary bet, but it's very much, I would say, Mercury or bust for me in that particular game. And then I don't want to fade the Aces this early, but there's no way I could take them as 14.5-point favorites on the road, even against, the second worst team in basketball. So I don't know. I don't mind the Sparks first half. I really like the under, and I think that's probably the only spot, but it's not glamorous, but I think that's got to be the spot that you're targeting here come Thursday night.
That's awesome. By the way, I'm digging into the WNBA stats page. There's a lot. Like, they analyze lineups. You can take a look at 5-player lineups. Get a lot of data on those lineups. There's honestly, a lot of really cool stuff. Do they have pace metrics in here, or are you deriving those yourself?
Yeah, they do.
Somewhere?
They do have it. I don't know exactly where it is. And there's also a Wii Hoops. I don't know if you're, I know some of you guys are into the R packages. There's a Wii Hoops that actually brings a lot of this in as well to your environment. Why am I not seeing pace? It is a value in Wii Hoop, I want to say, is where I'm actually pulling it in from. I thought it was actually.
Yeah,
I'll dig around.
That was going to be my next question, was for anyone that is looking to model this themselves. You mentioned there's an R package out there. Anything else that you're using that is publicly available that people could go play around with?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the betting markets are a very worthwhile thing as well. So if you need priors on any of that, you can definitely reach out to me. Yeah, the WNBA stats page is really good. I think there's one other that I've used for like game logs. I'm kind of spacing on the name right now. Of course, I got to look up.
We can throw it in the chat. Worst case, if folks want to dive in. I mean, in the description, and Discord.
I want to say it's PBP Stats. I know I think the guy does both NBA and WNBA. Daryl Blackport is his Twitter name, but he's a guy I've worked with a little bit in the past. I know he has a Patron as well. Charges a little bit for it, but I think would also probably give you some data if you ask for it, but he has all like, the individual player level data that I think is really worthwhile as well. So PvP stats it is kind of like the third spot I also use.
Awesome. Yeah, join the Discord, get more on the WNBA. Okay, so we have a few bets. We got our Mercury 35-1. Our Mercury cover the first half. Under in Ace Sparks. It's a good start. We're recording this on a Wednesday evening, so you've got value already for your Thursday evening if you're looking for something. This is awesome. We got to keep this going. Brad, I don't know how to watch these games, but I'm excited to find out. And I am looking forward to texting you and going, "Hey man, do you have a stream?"
our bi-monthly text today. Yeah. So we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
So one more plug, but that is another really great thing about the WNBA is they do have an app with a really reasonable subscription, and basically any game that they have is going to be on there. So that is actually, it's definitely worth your while as well. I think it costs like $49 or something like that for this season. But you can basically watch every single game on that. So I would definitely check that out as well. And yeah, I will be, for the printing press, as soon as I run the model, with the bets, and I will be dumping it into the preferred location for bets, every single time that I don't get to come on this podcast and basically chop it up with you guys, which is my favorite thing to do. So
love it. We'll get you. We'll definitely have a consistent presence. We have to. It's about to be baseball season. I think Judah is now officially the baseball guy just by default. But we're W guys. We're Mercury guys. We're W guys. Obviously Ben Brown guys. Well, yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Let's get out of here on this. There's one NBA game tomorrow evening. Heat Celtics. I didn't put a lot on the game last night. I don't know. I was leaning Heat, but a couple of small props, but didn't have much. The Heat now, though, in this game, the narrative is that the Celtics are back. The Celtics are back, guys. ESPN thinks that the Celtics have a 45% chance or 47% chance, something like that, to win the series, coming back from an 0-3 deficit. This is something that's never happened in NBA history. The Wizards at ESPN Analytics are giving this a 47% chance. It's absolutely amazing. We need them to start a sports book. We absolutely need it. The market is buying into this a little bit. The Celtics are -8. They're obviously at home. It would then go back to Miami for a game 6 and then back to Boston for a game 7. Many brilliant people on ESPN as well saying that the Celtics are back and that they think they're going to take it to 7 and win in 7. Curious, but guys, what do we think? Are we buying into this Celtics resurrection narrative?
No, I think what happened was you saw a 3-point regression for the Miami Heat finally hit them. They were kind of white hot from deep for much of the last, I think, like 5 or 6 playoff games, not even just this series so far. I mean, will that continue? I don't know, but that is what I think actually happened. Maybe you look into some props on guys you think he'll hit some shots from deep, or maybe even an overplay, even though it is an elimination game, or maybe you just take Heat +8 because clearly, being in Boston has not mattered thus far in this series.
Yeah. I'm with Brad quite a bit on this. I have basically been tailing Arjun's 3-point player props. So he who has been completely fire, I would say. Unfortunately, I think we went with Duncan Robinson yesterday, he only played like 6 minutes in the first half, which I don't even know what happened, but he did get up 3-pointers. I think he bricked all of them basically. So that one did not get home, but that was like the first time basically. But I'm not even seeing his number on DraftKings right now, but I think he might be a spot that I would potentially double down on if Arjun gives the go ahead, because I think that was, creating a little bit of a buy low opportunity here on Thursday night. So that's the spot I like. If not, I'm riding Jimmy Butler in the Heat. He, as a Timberwolves fan, I can't quit Jimmy Butler. I mean, just look at the guy. All he does is win, baby. So it's not Minnesota.
I am
Bulls legend, Timberwolves legend, maybe future Lakers legend. I mean, who knows?
Future Lakers legend.
Also, apparently, Jimmy Butler's son of Michael Jordan. That's another rumor that's out there.
You saw also apparently him and Shakira, who was sitting courtside, they follow each other on socials now after he put on an all-time. Yeah, so I mean the guy is having a playoff run truly for the ages.
Right.
You just got to tip your cap. You just got to tip your cap.
Wow. I heard the other day that Shakira and I think Lewis Hamilton are dating. So
Interesting. Interesting. Okay.
Or we're on a yacht together. Same thing. At this point. Yes, I am. So I think Heat money line plus 245. By the way, Robinson was like my one play last night, and it was excruciating. But I will hop back on the Argent bandwagon. No doubt about it. We win and we lose as a team. On FanDuel right now, it should be noted that 88% of the money is on Miami from a spread perspective. Not, I think, entirely surprising, but I kind of like money line plus 245. I'm not going to buy into the Celtics like every pundit out there. I think that's ridiculous. They had Al Horford hitting threes. You talk about the regression on like the Miami side from 3-point perspective, but like Al Horford was canning threes. I don't know that that's something that I want to buy into. So our Heat and our Mercury. Birds of a feather.
A bad combo. Don't combine those two things. But
yeah, exactly. All right, that was our podcast. This is the first episode of the forecast diving into the WNBA. We'll do some more of these. We will have football back as well. Don't worry. Sunday we will be back with Judah. It'll be a great podcast. We'll start doing some division previews as well, which will be a lot of fun. So it'll be a good mix and match of football, preparing for the season, and all the betting that we're going to do during the off season to keep us alive during the summer. Ben, you're a key part of that. Appreciate you. Thank you for all of your great work. Follow him at PFF_Ben Brown on Twitter, and go check out all of his picks in the Discord. We love you all. Peace.